Welcome to this panel. I'm Vikram Mahidhar. I'm from Apollo Global Management on the private equity side. And what we wanted to do during this session was really bring in an investor perspective, but also an operator perspective to you as to how we are generating value in private equity using tech, digital, and data. A lot of times, I hear from my colleagues, particularly my technology leader colleagues, that private equity seems to be a black box. So what happens here? So we're going to open that up today and hear from some of our tech leaders who are here on the panel. So right from the other side, I have Dan Parks, who is the CIO of the Venetian, the iconic Venetian from Las Vegas. I have Ashok Kumar, who is the CTO of Brightspeed. It's one of the internet provider companies that provides that brings internet to rural America. I have Steve Faas, my fellow partner from Apollo, focuses on technology. And I have Tony Bishop, who's the Chief Data Officer of one of our portfolio companies, which is a specialty insurance company called Aspen. So welcome. We'll get started. I think the first and foremost piece is, we'll tell you the whole story on what happens right from day one when we are looking at a company, doing the diligence. What do we think about it in terms of value creation from technology standpoint? And all the way to what does it take to deliver value during the PE ownership, if you may. This morning we talked about CIO as a wizard. We talked about CIO as a full stack leader. But one big element to that is speed to value. And I'm super proud of my tech leaders here who actually not only are full stack leaders, they are also wizards, but then at the same time, they're delivering transformation worth 10 years in a couple of years. That's pretty phenomenal. So we'll hear a little bit more about that. So with that, Steve, I'll just share, start with you. When we are looking at companies from, investment perspective, what are the key considerations from value creation standpoint and diligence standpoint?
So when we start diligence, we typically have a deal thesis. The deal team comes out and they say, this is how we think we can make money on this deal. And in private equity, it really comes down to, we buy a company based on a multiple of their earnings, their EBITDA. And how we make money ultimately is we either increase the EBITDA or we increase the multiple. And it's that simple. So when we look at a company, we say, what's the thesis of how we can increase EBITDA or how we can increase the multiple we're going to get from this company when we exit in 4, 5, 6 years. With that, during diligence, our primary focus is creating a value creation plan. What are the ways we're going to grow EBITDA through cost out, through revenue growth, through automation, through whatever the levers we're going to pull are. But then also, when it's private equity, we're playing with somebody else's money. We're taking investment dollars from a private source, and we are investing in companies to grow them. So when you're playing with somebody else's money, you don't want to incur a great deal of risk. So during due diligence, we also focus a great deal on risk. And in the tech space, that's cyber risk, tech obsolescence risk, but then also, is there a technology risk associated with achieving the deal thesis? If the deal thesis is around M&A, do we have a solid platform to add to for M&A? If the deal thesis is around growth, do we have platforms that we can grow from? Things like that. So that's kind of how we generate the thought process during the diligence.
That's great. And risk is just one side of the equation. When we think about it in private equity world, in terms of value creation, we think all the way from risk to revenue growth to innovation. A lot of talk about ChatGPT, generative AI. We do that too. We're not going to talk too much about it because you've had enough of it. Let's move to the next stage where when we are in the acquisition mode or investment mode, a lot of times we carve out companies, and carve out is messy. and two of my fellow leaders here, both Dan Parks and Ashok, have gone through pretty exhaustive carve-outs. So, Dan, we'll start with you. What is the technology leader's role in a carve-out?
Yeah, great question. So the role is really to get away from the parent company as quickly as possible and to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. It may seem like it's a simple task, but it turns out that it's not. We have a significant amount of technology. You've got to figure out what you're taking with you, what you're leaving behind. You've got to, in our case, we had a new domain, new email address. You've got to separate your Microsoft 365, your financials, all of your data. So huge amount of work in order to be able to get out, before you can even start this value creation, just to be able to be a separate standalone company is a tremendous amount of work. And you just get a very short period of time to accomplish those tasks.
Ashok, your point of view?
Yeah, just wanted to mention one thing. So Brightspeed, which started about 6 months ago in the operations, and we are the 5th largest ILAC in the country. Nobody knows about it yet. Right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So just think about, we were formed by divestiture from Lumen Technologies. And as you divide the company, you are dividing the customer base. From what they used to be served by Lumen and now with Brightspeed, there's a huge risk to our customers, to our employees, and obviously to the regulators as well. And for the technology, it becomes very important that we divide or carve out this business where there is, we talk to ourselves that we want zero impact. For our customers and for our employees. We want a day before and day after the cutover, nobody knows that we have cutover, right? And that's a huge challenge. You have to take all the customer data, all the employees' data, and then carve that out as a different entity. And in our case, we didn't exist. So it was not about a company merging with something else. We were non-existent. Now you are essentially standing up a new telecom without any infrastructure, right? So you have to build all that infrastructure on which this whole telecom company can run. So that was a challenge. What we had to go through.
So Ashok, it's pretty challenging, right? I mean, you are starting a brand new telecom company from ground up. How long do you have?
Great question. So like any other PE, we went through a due diligence process, which was about 12 months. And we just literally, we had 12 months to get this company up and running from ground zero. And to give you an example, as I said, we didn't exist. And before we took over those 20 states from Lumen, we had an up and running company within the span of 12 months. And now we are a fully operating telecom in 20 states, what we took over. And we have 3 to 5 years to transform what the goal of the company is, to build the fiber network, to what we want to do after we have taken the 20 states, we would be building fiber to the home, to these homes, and we have about 3 to 5 years. But to answer your question, we had less than 12 months to get this up and running.
So this is a perfect example of speed. Doing decade worth of work in a couple of years, starting a brand new telecom company, ground up, and we'll talk more about it, what cool things Ashok is doing there. And by the way, at the same time, you're serving existing customers. When you carved out company, customers are not gone, customers come with you. It's pretty fascinating, right? Now, speaking of sort of, value creation, go ahead, Steve.
Just a point on that. When we do carve-outs, and Dan mentioned it, Ashok mentioned it, getting off the TSAs, the transition services agreements with the parents, getting off them as quickly as possible and as successfully as possible is critically important to our value creation plan. Because until we get that done, then we can't go after putting the fiber in the ground or improving the customer experience at the Venetian or all the great things we want to do to improve these companies. But the carve-out is a distraction. Until we get that completed, we can't really focus on the value creation. So speed is everything in a carve-out.
Yep.
So we've used the term value creation plan quite a bit, right? and that's the magic. That's where a lot of magic happens. Delivering, this decade worth of value in a couple of years, there's a science to it. So, first I'm gonna, ask Steve, how do we put together a value creation plan? What goes in it? And then I'll switch to Dan and Ashok because they're living it. So how do you live it?
So it starts with our due diligence, where we identify all the levers that we want to pull. And every company is a little different, but there's always growth levers, there's cost takeout levers, there's ESG levers, there's talent levers, there's risk levers, all of those things. And we take those and quantify what the upside opportunity is. We prioritize the things, and then we put them to paper, work with the management team, get that buy-in to have that plan that we can then go execute.
Yeah. And by the way, it's all tightly coupled with the business strategy.
Absolutely.
And all of that is underwritten from the get-go on day one. So everybody is in it together, including the value from data, and we'll come to Tony in a little bit as to how we are driving value from data. And by the way, the I is at the end goal, which is exit. Whenever the exit happens, 3 to 5 years from the day we close it. But the end goal is very clear in mind.
Yeah, and I think it's important that whenever we buy a company, we go to our investment committee and talk about what we want to do there, but before we buy the company, we have to have a very clear understanding of what our exit strategy is. Because we're going to own it for 3 to 5, 6 years, and we have to position ourselves for that exit. And so everything we're doing for the next several years is positioning for that exit.
So with that, Dan Parks, you are living it. You are driving 73 projects in year one. Tell us more about how you are driving the value creation plan. What's going on?
Yeah, Steve indicated, what it's like right out of the gate. You've got to move quickly. Some of the opportunities that you have when you're going through the carve-out and the separation is to jettison things that you don't need, processes, procedures, things that are ineffective. You have to develop new processes and procedures that make sense for the new organization. You have a chance to greenfield some things, which is kind of nice. It can make you a lot more efficient. But one of the things that we're doing at the Venetian is we have a tremendous amount of opportunity to upgrade software versions, applications, et cetera, across the board. And so we're taking advantage of this time. We're calling it a foundational year. And so there are, I think when we did the divestiture, we had 168 applications that we supported. We probably jettisoned about 13 of those. And we have a large number of critical applications that we're going through. And some of these are on-prem, not in the cloud, run on an AS400 type mainframe machine because we have such a large property, 7,100 rooms under one roof. And we turn those rooms over twice a week. So these systems are critical to us. So being able to make sure that before we start really getting after some of the value creation things, that we have stability across all of our platforms is absolutely critical. So I was able to get buy-in from Steve and Vikram and from our board and from our leadership to ensure that we were prepared as soon as we came out to get this foundational year behind us. We are working on other value creation plans, things that increase the customer experience. We're working on CRM initiatives and other things that we might talk about here in a little bit. But right out of the gate for us, it's all about having a foundational year and making sure that we're prepared and ready for significant growth here in the near future.
Well, that's fantastic. And Venetian is such an iconic brand. And what what Dan and team are doing there is really kind of bringing the customer experience to shine that brand even further. And before Apollo's ownership, the company did not invest as much in technology. And Dan jokingly used to say that I always was asked to pack 100 pounds of stuff in 5-pound bag, which was his budget. But now his bag has become 30 pound. He still has to fit 100 pounds worth of stuff in a 30-pound bag, right, Dan? So moving on to you, Ashok, you are building a brand new telecom company probably you're vicariously living your dream in a way to build a brand new company in cloud. So tell us more about your value creation.
Yeah, and actually I am living my dream. Yeah, I came from Verizon, worked for 20 years there, and being in a place where I could rebuild or build a telecom from the ground up, that's really a dream. But to answer your question, Vikram, see, look, for Brightspeed, when you look at that from the business perspective, the value is created by building fiber, right? That's what our value is. We are taking copper assets and building fiber to these houses. The question to us is, how do you build this fiber with the best cost profile there is in the industry? Nobody else has ever done it, right? That is the question what we had. And of course, there are a lot of things which play in when you're rolling out fiber. Of course, there's material, there is labor, there is technology, there is engineering and all that. And IT plays a pivotal role. And we applied innovation, as I said, I'm living the dream. We applied innovation where nobody else has done in the industry. I'll give you an example. So many people talked about ChatGPT. So let me give this example, how we are using real-like AI. So typically how engineering is done in a telecom company or when you're building fiber, you literally draw AutoCAD designs before you actually send the construction crew to the building the fiber. That takes weeks and months. And so we turned that around completely. So we had information from Lumen. We knew where the poles are existing. And if you knew where the poles are existing and where AI is today, you could just use the data and then design your entire network automatically in a matter of minutes, right? And that reduces the cost. The cost model of deploying this fiber, which otherwise would not be done. This is just one example, but and the reason I took this example is technology leaders and IT. It plays a huge role when it comes to the overall valuation of the company, and this is something what we started.
Yeah, I mean, it's phenomenal, right? Months worth of work in 20 minutes, right? And technology leaders like Ashok and Dan and others really have to make those decisions and prioritize, right? I mean, one of the, looking at it from investor perspective, I will flip the question to Steve. Steve, you're in the middle of evaluating a bunch of companies right now. How do you put weight on technology? Where do you give haircut? Or you are also in the middle of actually exiting a couple of companies. So pick any story and tell us, how does technology really change valuations?
Everyone is a little different, but it can impact it in a couple ways. One, where do we think we can apply technology to reduce cost? Where do we think we can apply technology to get growth? But then also, sometimes by applying technology, we can make it a sexier company. And if we make it a sexier company, then we're going to get a higher multiple on the EBITDA when we go to exit it. But then on the opposite side, if we don't fix the technology and we've got a bunch of tech debt, when we go to sell that company, the buyer is going to come in and say, well, I'm not paying for this. I'm going to shortcut my price on this investment by whatever I believe it's going to take to upgrade that technology. So we want to, Dan upgrading all his foundational systems, we want him to do that because when he does that, we're creating a better foundation that we can build from. But then B, when we go to exit it, we're not going to get a haircut on the price because he hasn't done those upgrades.
Now with that, the value of data. We talked about how Ashok is using data. We talked about how Dan is delivering customer experience, and data is a critical piece of it. We don't see CIO's role as completely decoupled from a CDO's role. And Tony joined Aspen mid-flight of our investment as the Chief Data Officer about a year now, Tony?
3/4 of the way through, I would say.
3 quarters. We always count in quarters, yeah. So three quarters. And Tony has delivered already tremendous amount of value. But Tony, how do you think about data from value creation standpoint?
So I think I'm in a little bit of a unique position because I've probably spent 22 years working in insurance and data and analytics. where for publicly owned companies where the conversation is quarters and definitely years. The insurance industry itself doesn't move as fast as perhaps everyone else. So when I joined Aspen, I think it's 6 months ago now, and we talked about what we want to do with data analytics and add value. Quickly, the conversation with Vikram and Steve was, yeah, that's good, but we're talking weeks and months. How are we going to deliver all that? So I think in the insurance industry, this is something that I've had to try to figure out, how do we adapt the concepts of what we're trying to do with data and analytics to meet the speed of what we're trying to do with a private equity setup. And I think what we did was we really just took all the opportunities where we could get a return on investment, both top line, bottom line, in the short, medium, and long term. We know there's a lot of ideas that we need to do. It's going to take a lot longer, but there's definitely things that we can do in the short term, and we tried to create a focus around delivering those. Some examples, speaking from a data point of view, data quality is a massive problem for all companies. It costs the most for reconciliation, regulatory issues. So we immediately had to put in data governance, get data transparency, data standards included, and the whole company was bought into that concept, and we implemented that. And another one's automation. I know it sounds obvious, but you know, the close process for your financials, there's a lot of manual processing going on, so those were automatically put into our backlog for automation. Being in insurance, the way that we price risks and select risks, the triaging of submissions coming in, a lot of that is manual in the insurance industry, so we look to try to automate that as well. And these are things that we can deliver in months rather than in years, and start to get that confidence that we can deliver for our board, but also for our owners.
You know, the critical piece here is everything that Tony talked about is completely, again, connected to exit, completely connected to protecting the downside, right? You know, transparency of data, data quality. I mean, all my fellow colleagues here will agree that data quality is a journey. It's a never-ending journey. It takes 5 years, 10 years for companies to achieve that. But here, you know, prioritizing what really matters, because you're not going to be able to clean the whole house probably ever. But prioritizing what really matters, right? And earlier, sort of in one of the sessions, we heard that, you know, insurance industry, they have to keep their products for sometimes 100 years until the last customer signs off, right? So what do you touch, what do you not touch? How do you sort of manage profitability but yet deliver customer experience? And data is at the heart of it. But there are other critical sort of, you know, value creation pieces to data. And Dan, you are driving customer experience. Do you want to share how you're using data strategy, or how you are thinking about your data strategy in CRM to drive value?
Yeah, so for you know, we're in the people business, and you know, we have data, we have information on our customers, but it's not where it needs to be. So we just launched a CRM initiative recently that's really going to give us more information about who stays on property. You know, when you think about the guests of the Venetian, it's not just simple. You know, people think we're a casino, but we have the world's largest privately owned exposition center in the world. So we have shows, Amazon, Dell, HP, large customers host with us, small customers as well. We have frequent independent travelers that are there for dining. They're not there for an event. They're also not there to gamble, although they may do a little bit of that. And then we have the casinos. And so we have different types of customers, and so we need to be able to effectively market to those customers and make sure that we understand who they are and what they like and what they want. So our CRM strategy is really focused on understanding that, so that we can build campaign management and have a better offer management strategy. The Venetian is occupied 98.6% of the time. It's unreal. We are always full, sometimes 100%, a lot of days. And so it's not a challenge of getting the most amount of people into the Venetian. We can do that any day. I mean, it's already there. What we need to focus on is how to optimize that mix so we generate the greatest amount of revenue from the guests that are there. And if you don't understand who those guests are, what their interests are, and you don't know how to market to them, you're not going to be able to achieve that success. So some of the strategies we're putting in place around data and CRM address that.
And what's fascinating to me is that, you know, if you are tracking the gaming industry at all, there is tremendous amount of internet gaming out there, and yet sort of the physical entertainment spaces like Venetian are competing with those online experiences. So now you not only have to deliver the physical customer experience, but compete with that online customer experience. And we'll come to that from innovation standpoint a little bit, but it's a pretty challenging task while replacing 73 different systems or whatever Dan is doing, yet delivering that world-class experience. It's fascinating to me. And Ashok, you gave us an example of how you are using data and AI to really sort of lay fiber in the ground. But then, what else are you doing with data?
Yeah, so I want to take a slightly different point of view. Of course, data is very critical for us when it comes to acquiring the right customers, when it comes to managing churn, knowing what to sell to whom. So all that we require our prospect data. But especially when it comes to telecom, knowing our existing customers and how do you relate the experience what our customers have with the experience what our network is having is really critical. And one of the key challenge what we had when we acquired these customers from Lumen, our customer service rating was really, really low. And the reason being, we were not making on-time repair, we were not doing, providing the commitment what we had to our customers. And what we are going to do is look at all the experience data. How do they use our services? And then combine that with how our network is performing so that you can be proactive, right? You should be knowing before a customer has a degraded experience on our internet, for example. So that is very important. And of course, that finally results into churn and customer experience and all that. But it comes even much before customer sees or we see the direct impact of that. So that's what we are building. We are building, of course, we are building a CDP platform, which everybody does. But at the same time, we are also building the platform which is correlating this data from how customer sees our service as well as what our network is experiencing at any given time.
Yeah, the fascinating thing to me about Brightspeed is that, it's very intentional. What Ashok and team are building in terms of gathering the right data sets, but building the right tools. And nowhere we've heard so far, and we'll come to this question, which is it's not about, I'm building a massive enterprise data warehouse, or I'm putting all my data in cloud and then we'll see what to do with it. But it's very, very intentional. I want to predict churn before the customer churns, right? And that's where sort of, the focus really comes into play when the decisions are being made. Now with that, of course, architectural decisions are very critical. Whether to build in cloud or to build on-prem. If to build in cloud, what choices to make? Should I go multi-cloud, etc. So Tony, you and Phil is in the audience somewhere. Yes. You and Phil is the CIO at Aspen, tag team and went through the decision. What are some critical sort of aspects that you consider around your journey to cloud?
Well, I think our situation was that when we came in, we were basically all on-prem. I think we were able to still be able to deliver outcomes and services for the organization, but it was clear that it wasn't cost effective. We didn't have the skills to take us to the sort of levels that we want to go, microservice architectures, doing data analytics, data science, this sort of thing. So in order for us to achieve the goals of our combined tech and data and analytics strategy, we needed to focus on an assessment in the cloud that could provide all of those capabilities that we needed to make use of tech and data in the right way to achieve those business outcomes and help us embed that in the actual business strategy. So we'd actually put together quite a thorough assessment matrix across all the different capabilities for the operations, tech, and data landscape. We then, using Apollo's partners in this space, did a thorough review with Google, AWS, Azure, and we went through all those different combinations of when should we be looking at SaaS, what should be, infrastructure-wise sitting on cloud, what could actually stay on-prem, and then tried to then put a reasonable cost structure around it just to see what would be the right combination of all of those different capabilities across our landscape to achieve those goals.
Yeah, and lately, by the way, cost of operating in cloud, at least for many companies, is just skyrocketing. And one of our portfolio companies, Rackspace, who are here in the audience, actually, offers services both in private cloud as well as public cloud, and so we get the sort of view from front seat as to what's happening out there. And there's the decisions are hard because it's hard to predict where your customer is going to land, and as the customer demand skyrockets, your cost of cloud can go sky high, particularly if it is not architected correctly. So Ashok, you are building the whole telecom company in cloud. Does that keep you up at night?
It keeps me up at night for the cost. But by the way, so we are the only telecom company who is 100% on the cloud, by the way. And some of it was because we were forced to. We are starting up a company and we have nothing, right? When we started in pandemic, all of us started on Zoom. I think we didn't meet Apollo face to face for a long time. Yeah. For a long time. So just imagine starting such a huge investment all on Zoom. And we had zero infrastructure, so we had to start on the cloud. Okay, now so that's the key point. But at the same time, the cost becomes a big challenge because at one point you have only 12 months to have this company up and running, right? Have you done all the analysis in terms of how you restructure from the cost perspective? That definitely is a challenge. But it's a question of how do you really mature around it and how do you put all the controls around it. The important thing is, of course, we were not migrating to cloud, right? So it was not lift or shift from something existing. It is you're starting up from the cloud. And the decisions would be made. And this goes with the partners we chose. It is important that they are growing along with us because we are still a small company. And we're starting up, so those kind of decisions became important as we were creating the cloud journey.
Pretty awesome. Your 5th largest small company. I like that. I like that a lot. Any questions in the audience?
I can't actually see.
Sorry, I can't see with the lights flaring in my eyes.
I just had a question around staffing in carve-out specifically, probably for the gentleman on your left there. Are there firms that you partner with that are really kind of have a baseline playbook for the carve-out? I mean, right now, there's a lot of work you have to do technically, but how do you staff if you're not getting, a lot of people from the parent, right? We're all focused on M&A. We take cost out, we drive it, but going the other direction, how do you deal with the staffing challenges trying to get off that TSA so quickly?
Steve can write a thesis on it, but Steve, why don't you go?
So every carve-out is different. How dependent you are on the parent is different. What processes you're getting or you're inheriting are different. What staff you're getting or inheriting is different. But we try to, when we need to do a significant hiring of people, we try to outsource as much of that as possible because we can get the scale quickly that way. But we also sometimes have to invest in massive hiring to bring the people on board quickly. But it rarely is that a stumbling block for us. Getting the right leaders in place is the bigger challenge, and making sure we've got the talent that can drive the change and drive the value creation that we need. That's probably the bigger challenge we have.
I think again is not one size fits all, but I just add on to your point, Steve. Sometimes it's a question of timing as well, and I'm just recalling we had when we signed the deal, we had 3 months. We had to have the company start running, And we had no people. I was the first technology person, so we had no people. So we had to rely upon our partners to a large extent to get us up and running. But at the same time, you couldn't be building a team which is just solely built on partners and the contract labor. So right now we have a healthy mix of both employees and the contractor. And some of it is, of course, the challenge. To me, the attraction to the team was really the challenge, what we had ahead of us and what we were doing as a team.
And Dan, your challenge was a little different in that you did inherit a large portion of your team, but zero in the cybersecurity space. And you had to create a whole new cyber team.
Correct, yeah. Now, that team, reports into a different entity, but yeah, absolutely. We had to, carve out cyber, build a new team. We did acquire some people from the parent, brought in a managed security service provider for a while. And so, yeah, that was a journey. I think specifically to this question here, there's really two phases. You've got the carve out that you've got to complete in a short period of time. I don't know that there's a silver bullet there. I think you have to go with the trusted partners that you know to help you get there through the carve out. But then when you get in the value creation phase after the carve out, there's a little bit of right sizing, management, spans and layers conversations, and some right sizing that goes on there. You're going to wind up with a core team of foundational people to support you, and then you're going to tie the staffing to typically professional services and contractors. You're going to tie that back to, those are capital expenses tied to every project that you work on. So you're going to want to make sure you capitalize everything. We've talked a little bit about it at the beginning, but remember that everything's focused on EBITDA. And so OpEx is the enemy of EBITDA. So anything that you can capitalize, you're going to want to capitalize. So making sure that you're accounting for all of those resources that you're going to need for the value creation side, staffing appropriately, not through FTEs. You want to keep your fixed costs the same, but through professional services and contractors is a recipe for success.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Any other questions?
Hi. Hi, I'm Priyanka Nagpal from Gravitas Consulting. It's been inspiring to hear how you've leveraged technology to accelerate business outcomes and impacts, which honestly, a few seconds ago even would sound futuristic, to be able to do something that takes years, decades into 2 or 3 years. It's crazy. But now that you've done that, are there any futuristic technologies that you are envisioning? And it could pretty much even be hypothetical, but I'd love to hear if you're envisioning any futuristic technologies and how are you preparing for that today?
It's a great question.
But you take it.
You
take
it. We'll start with Ashok, and then we'll talk about sort of how we are working around artificial intelligence and a few other things.
All right, so let me give you this example. Again, it does boil back to the generative AI because I just lived it 4 weeks ago. So we as a company, we look at, to improve the customer experience, we listen to calls. And we listen to what customer calls, as in like the actual calls when customer call or 1-800 number. And I just happened to listen to a few of calls in which this person has to make almost 8 calls to get her issue resolved. And the issue was really, really difficult to resolve because she had a power outage and all kinds of things. And every time the calls goes to the next agent, she has to repeat herself again and again and again. And it took us, who were listening to these calls, an hour to understand what she's trying to really do. And then what we did, we took those recordings and we passed that to the ChatGPT. And here it is. It takes these hours-long calls, gives you a good 10-line summary of exactly what this customer needs, which our agents could not understand by such a long duration. This is just one example. ChatGPT and AI is completely going to change how customer experience and the customer service is done. Companies are saying they have been investing, but this thing completely would change, and that's what I see, is would change how our customers are going to be experiencing and how would they be interacting with us. This would change the game. This is what I see. Besides, of course, building the fiber, which is table stakes to us. We have to get to the cost of the building the fiber. But the next big thing would be is how do you change the customer experience.
And by the way, generative AI is in vogue, so obviously, we had to talk about that. But Tony, you guys are doing something really good with AI with regard to, claims submissions as well as, intake of new requests.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point on the question, yes, we have to start looking at the futuristic elements of technology because it's changing all the time. So whilst we're trying to get the foundations right, we are running these innovation labs and these data camps to get the different teams across the different functions to think about ideas of how we can use more advanced concepts of technology to help select better risks and speed up the claims processing. But yeah, we're exploring ideas of looking at drones for claim assessments so that they can get there faster and feed the information back. Mostly with partners, but there are a lot of fintech companies who are doing insurance models that are able to predict kind of the propensity to bind for cyber risks. On the property side, we can actually get real-time exposure impacts for any sort of cat perils, ESG ratings. So a lot of this stuff's actually being done by other companies because it would cost us too much money to obviously embed with that. So we have to stay in touch with all this, and we need a landscape that actually can interact with that. So API strategies and things like that's our goal, is to make sure that we can actually play in these ecosystems.
And by the way, from investor standpoint, we look at all our 50 plus portfolio companies, 100 billion plus in revenue, and we say, well, can we afford for Ashok or Dan to get distracted from that value creation plan? The answer is no. But yet we need to support them to drive innovation, with that scale. So what we are doing is centrally we are creating, platforms where, like for example, we are creating a platform around AI where we will capitalize and fund the innovation. We have a venture studio called 25 Madison. We bring them into the mix. We create the foundation. We work with upstarts, we fund them, but to benefit our portfolio companies. And that way, they win without spending a penny. But at the same time, if any of those ideas succeed, then we capture the upside as well. So, it's win-win on both sides. But we are aggressively going after it as we speak. Early days, lots of proof points. We think that customer care will be changed dramatically. That's what we thought 3 years ago with all kinds of chatbots, but never did. Hopefully this time is a charm.
One thing actually I just wanted to bring up was a cool little scenario, and maybe some of your teams are doing this anyway, but we just had an email exchange, myself and the CIO over there, where the engineering team for all of our grads and the junior engineers, they were using ChatGPT now to do code reviews. So whether they were writing in SQL, Python, R, working in ML, but they were able to find a way to be able to put the code actually into the ChatGPT, and then it could give feedback on how things could be tuned and stuff like that. So I think there's some really cool stuff now that we can do to even help our own teams to mature and become more upskilled in what we need them to be doing.
That's good.
That's definitely a very strong opportunity. So with that, we'll switch topics to people. People, process, technology, and my fellow leaders here believe that it should be in that order. Even though we are sitting at MIT and talking about technology, people is a very critical piece of it, extremely critical piece of it, and it starts with leadership. When we acquire companies or invest in companies, the first and foremost thing that we look at is that do we have the right leadership to drive that value at speed? So I'm going to turn to Steve. Steve, what is our criteria? What dimensions do we look at to put such brilliant leaders in seat?
Sure. So and I keep saying the same thing. It's different with every company, but we've come up with about a dozen things that we look for in technology leaders across our enterprise. But the first thing we do is we start with the value creation plan and to understand which of those should be the highest priority. And so, for example, with these guys, having experience doing a carve-out in the past would be an advantage because you'll learn a lot. Or if part of the value creation plan is around M&A, mergers and acquisitions, if you've done a lot of integration of other companies, that becomes a priority. Or if it's around driving commercial growth, then that becomes a priority. But there's always a core set of things that are, you need to be a technologist, and you need to have been there, done that before. You need to have the business acumen, the financial acumen, because in the PE world, that's all we talk about is finance. And if you can't speak the language of the deal team and speak the language of finance, you're going to struggle in a PE investment. But there's a core set of things like that that we are always looking for.
And from the flip side, given that we look at the business acumen, the finance acumen, technology, building your own talent, right? Ashok, you started from clean slate. How do you think about building talent in your organization?
So for me, knowing that the amount of time you have to transform, I looked at it very deliberately, what kind of experience you want in people, right? So as we were building the technology team, and we started from ground up, I had a very intentional mix, which we needed, is at least 1/3 of our people in technology, in IT teams must be experienced in telecom. And the reason being, there's nobody sitting out there, because we didn't exist. Nobody is sitting out there who is going to give requirements, quote unquote, right? There's no requirements. You got to know the business. So it was absolutely a must that the team who is getting onboarded must know the business. But at the same time, we did not want to hire everybody from telecom, because then you are striving innovation, because then you have only one way of thinking. So we were deliberate that we hired from different industries, but we had to start with people who know telecom, because we have to start from the ground up. So that has been a motto, and so far when I look back now in 1.5 years, how the team has been built, and that's how the team is a good, healthy mixture of people who have telecom experience, but then now we have people from all aspects of the industry across the.
And Dan and Tony, you had to take a brownfield organization and up the talent. Dan, let's start with you.
Yeah, the Venetian's 24 years old, and it was founded by an incredible visionary, Sheldon Adelson, and he ran that company, even though it was publicly traded. He had 56% of the stock, I think. So it was kind of like working for the world's largest mom and pop. I did get to work for him for a short period of time, and there was a very set way of doing things at the Venetian. And it's a fabulous property, and he did an incredible job with it. When we shifted from that to Apollo ownership, the whole dynamic changes, and your teams have to be able to adapt and adjust to that change. We've talked about the finance and EBITDA, and that kind of really is all we talk about, a lot with Steve. But you have to bring your teams on board to that concept. Everything has to be looked at through the lens of EBITDA. You heard us talk about you have 5 to 6 years. Well, the first year is chewed up, right, with divestiture and carve out. The last year you got to have a stable run rate. You can't be doing any massive changes or investments in the last year. So now you look at it, you really only have about 3 years to do this massive transformation, 2 to 3 years. So you have to get everybody on board speaking the same language. They all have to understand this new way of looking at things. Before, we kind of used to spread the peanut butter on our projects. Every department, hey, I want this, I want that. Everybody would get something. They would get their piece of the pie. you have to change that culture. You have to shift that with your team, with your people. I know the question was around how I built up my team. I think just as importantly is how did we change the business to think differently about what it is that we're doing. So now everybody's on board with this, and we have better ways of prioritizing. So with my team internally, some people, in fact, quite a few people adopted the new methodology, the new way of thinking, and so we had some success there. Some people didn't like it, and that's okay. They they moved on and did other things, but you really have to have buy-in from your team. I think if your focus has to be on people that can get things done, that have a bias for action, that have this focus on execution. That is as every bit as important as their technical skills. So we've had some success there, and so far it's worked out for us. Communication is key.
Excellent. Tony?
Similar situation. We had kind of a landscape that was, it got the company as far as it could. We had talent but to understand the systems and the solutions, but we needed to do a significant upgrade in the tech and data infrastructure and the applications, which meant that if we wanted to go at speed, we needed to bring in people who could actually help build that out and move it from the current landscape we are on today to the new one. But we had to obviously balance that. We couldn't lose the knowledge that the engineers and the analysts and everything had on the current landscape, because that feeds into how we build out the new platform. So we did go with a more external contractor approach to bring in those niche skills. And there was, similar to Dan, there was some resistance in some pockets, and we had to deal with those and make some tough decisions. And then there were others that were just keen to learn, and we knew that we were gonna bring them on this journey with us. But it hasn't been smooth sailing. We've been learning some of the things around, like key positions like architects and analysts. If they don't have insurance knowledge, it frustrates the business, and because they feel like they have to train people to do these jobs. But they had the skills to help us do the designs and do the implementations. And even in those scenarios, we've now had to start looking at pivoting on the strategy with some of those key roles and trying to get the industry knowledge in as well. So it's been a bit of a mixed bag, but
Excellent.
It's exciting.
Excellent. So along those lines, in the last 5 minutes of this panel, actually, we're going to launch our Apollo PE Tech Leader of the Year award. While we take pride in bringing the best technology leaders, but amongst them, driving excellence. And I obviously took a page from, I don't know if George Westerman is here or not. I was his research assistant 20 years ago, but took a page from his book, and we've evaluated all our portfolio company leaders. So we have last 5 minutes to give out that award. We have a bunch of fellow CIOs here in the room, but any last questions for this panel? Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. Steve, if I can ask you to stay back. Thank you. Great panel. So as I mentioned, business acumen, financial acumen, technology acumen, speed, all of that is super critical. And what Steve and I did, along with a few others, was evaluated all our technology leaders. And in case of the MIT CIO Award, there are a bunch of interviews that are performed. In our case, the good news is that we work day in and day out with all these technology leaders. So the choice was hard because we take a huge pride in sort of just bringing in the best CIOs possible. But the award for this year, for 2023, for Apollo PE Tech Leadership goes to
Ashok. There you go. There it is. You didn't know you were coming back up.
I had no idea.
Nicely done, Ashok.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, this is a surprise, but again,
The team, what we have built over last 1.5 years, obviously we couldn't have done with the team. So this award really is for the Brightspeed team. Thank you.
Thank you all.